Afternoon. This afternoon, we are going to be taking you through the blueprint and, of course, talking about how it relates to literacy. This information may be completely new to some of you, and I welcome you to this ride and hope you learn something new. And this also might be a refresher course for some of you, which is great. And again, hopefully you will learn something new. We're going to have opportunities to engage and ask questions, so please feel free to drop questions in the chat or raise your hand. Both Diana and our intern Kalia will be monitoring those facets and letting me know when I need to answer a question. Other than that, grab yourself something to eat and let's get learning. Again, just a brief introduction. Again, my name is Riya. I'm Strong Schools Maryland's policy researcher. So to give you an overview of what to expect during this presentation, we're going to look over some historical context of the blueprint, and we're going to go into the blueprint while providing some ways that the blueprint uplifts literacy. And then we're going to wrap up with some recommendations and how you can take action. So before I move on, I would really appreciate if all of you introduce yourself in the chat. It's really great to understand where you're coming from in terms of education, the spaces that you are in. So if you could put your name, your pronouns, and your role and organization, that would be super helpful as I frame this presentation. So while you guys do that, I'm going to dive right on in. And here we have a little timeline overview of more modern history in Maryland education. Before we get to where we are right now and where we are headed, it's important to recognize where we are coming from, especially to ensure that we are not repeating the past. In 1996, we have the Bradford versus Maryland State Board of Education, which was a case that found that the state was not fulfilling its obligation to children in the state to provide a thorough and efficient public school education. From that spurred the creation of what we call the Thornton Commission in 1999. Eventually, the Bridge to Excellence legislation from the recommendations of the commission was passed in 2002 to reform school financing and funding formulas. This piece of legislation notably introduced the concept of things like the weighted formula and really laid out the foundation for education funding today. However, when it passed through the legislature and became law, the state lacked a funding source to sustain it. So when the recession hit in 2008, with no dedicated funding source, the state did not hit their funding commitment and schools were basically placed on the chopping block. I want you to keep that in mind as we head into other topics. This leads us years later to a refocus on equitable school funding research with the formation of another commission, the Commission on Innovation and Excellence in Education. This was led by Dr. William Britt Kirwan, and a lot of you might know this. It was also referred to as the Kirwan Commission. This commission was tasked with two charges: to update Maryland's public education funding formula and make policy recommendations to create a world-class system of public schools in the state. From these recommendations and a lot of statewide voices, the Blueprint for Maryland's Future legislation was developed, and it passed in 2020 during the shortened legislative session due to COVID. However, our governor at the time, Larry Hogan, executed his veto power and vetoed the blueprint. Because just like the Bridge to Excellence, what do you do in a crisis? Cut education. But the legislature, thankfully, was able to override the veto in order for it to become law. And this leads us to where we are in implementation today. So you might be asking, what even is the blueprint? And put simply, the best words I can put it into is the Blueprint for Maryland's Future offers us the opportunity to build a world-class system of public education for all students in Maryland. And now a very valid next question is, why does Maryland need the blueprint? So there are a lot of valid answers to that question. We're a group of very smart folks, so you might be thinking of an answer that is not on the screen right now, and it is correct. But I'm going to just go through a few of them. The first was that the state was in need of systemically increased and equitably distributed funding for public schools. So disparities in funding created opportunity gaps and overall outcome declines for many student groups in the state, specifically Black and Brown students, students with disabilities, and students learning English. There's also a need specifically in students in concentrated poverty. There was also a high need for quality and diverse teachers. We know that having quality and diverse teachers within the classrooms with students, having students can relate to their teachers more, and that only increases achievement and success in school and life. And lastly, there was a necessity for college and career readiness. We know that Maryland as a state, the United States and the world is just getting even more competitive. We found the need to give students the proper support they need for the future, so they can succeed in any of their paths that they choose. So those were a few reasons why we needed the blueprint. So the blueprint has 5 pillars, and we're going to touch on aspects of each pillar. I want to stress that more information on each pillar can be found on our website. Kalia has put the link in the chat, but this is an overview. This is a complicated, incredible piece of legislation, and 30 an hour does not do it justice. So I stress, if something interests you, please refer back to our website. Please reach out, and we would love to talk to you more about it. So the first pillar is early childhood education. And you can think of this pillar as the foundation. So we know that a child's early years are the most critical for brain development and set the foundation for lifelong learning and achievement. So Pillar 1 focuses on building equitable early education opportunities that prepare all children for school and for success. So some pieces of this pillar are pre-kindergarten expansion. So the blueprint provides resources to serve 3- and 4-year-olds from low-income families at no or reduced cost to expand voluntary full-day pre-K. So that's one of the biggest parts of this pillar. But we also know that supporting early childhood development also means supporting families. So the blueprint funds the opening of 30 family support centers, also known as PADI centers, and 135 early learning centers, known as Judy centers, statewide by the early 2030s. These are meant to be resource centers, not only for children, but for their families and surrounding communities. This pillar also increases funding for Maryland Infants and Toddlers Program to support students with special needs. And finally, the blueprint created Transitional Supplemental Instruction Grants, TSI grants. And these grants provide funding for one-on-one and small group additional academic support for students in grades kindergarten to 3rd grade who are basically identified as struggling learners. For example, students who are struggling with reading or writing can get the extra support they need early in their academic career. In terms of literacy, this pillar is absolutely essential because we know that early literacy plays a key role in enabling the kind of early learning experiences that research shows are linked with academic achievement and success in adult life. The blueprint makes it a standard that every child has access to high quality pre-K, so they are exposed to that early literacy programming. Now, Pillar 2 is named High Quality and Diverse Teachers and School Leaders. Under the blueprint, there are salary increases and a new teacher career ladder. So what this includes is a starting teacher salary of $60,000 by 2026. So by 2026, every county, every school system in Maryland will have a starting salary of $60,000. There are also corresponding salary increases for specific achievements, like a $10,000 increase for national board certification. The blueprint also creates a new teacher quality and diversity grant program that allocates about $500,000 every year to recruit more teachers from historically Black colleges and universities and Hispanic serving institutions. And finally, like many other states, Maryland needs more teachers. So a big part of this pillar is focused on growing the pipeline of teachers and aims to attract economically diverse candidates by offering different opportunities to join the profession, including financial incentives and scholarship opportunities. This pillar is extra important for improving literacy in Maryland because what/who is the basis of literacy instruction? Teachers. And with the blueprint, there are established requirements for teacher preparation programs, creating high standards for teachers and the skills they must have to teach. Now we have pillar 3, which is the college and career readiness pillar of the blueprint. And you can think of this pillar as what the blueprint should accumulate to. So every student is ready for whatever path they have chosen, whether it be college or career or both. Firstly, the blueprint requires local school systems to use a data-driven approach to begin tracking ninth graders' progress to graduation, making sure that they are on track, and if not, to provide the resources to get back on track. It also requires schools to provide individualized career advising to every middle and high school student. The goal is that all students be college and career ready by the 10th grade, so that students are able to explore options for the next steps that they would like to take, whether that be an apprenticeship program or a dual enrollment course. It leaves those last 2 years of high school basically to build the school's skills needed to be college and career ready. Another big step taken in this pillar is the redefining of what it means to be college and career ready. Recently, the Maryland State Department of Education, or MSDE, commissioned a study on the CCR standard, so the College and Career Readiness Standard. Those findings and recommendations were released a few months ago, and that study is currently being used to develop a whole new college and career readiness standard that will be communicated to students and parents and schools with very shortly, probably within the next few months. The pillar should be an accumulation of all the hard work. Sorry, forgot to do this slide. This pillar should be the accumulation of all the hard work to improve literacy in the first 2 pillars. However, those tracking systems and other supports in this pillar make sure that no child gets left behind in terms of literacy. We're chugging along ahead. Let me know if anyone has any questions, but Pillar 4 is more resources for all students to succeed. So Shamoya, our amazing executive director of Strong Schools, is not here with us right now because she's doing some other great work, but she always liked to imagine this pillar as the most imaginative pillar. It elevates equity in our education system by focusing on historically underserved populations like students with disabilities, multilingual students, and students with from low-income households. So I just want to emphasize that this list that I'm going to read out is not an exhaustive list of what this pillar does. It is just a tidbit, but Pillar 4 includes a plan to increase the number of community schools across the state. So for those who don't know, community schools serve as hubs that bring families, communities, and partners together to remove those barriers to learning, whether it be mental health or food access. Community schools address the needs of those students and families directly within the school. Using an asset-based approach, community schools strive to strengthen connections to generate improved student outcomes. So a community school receives additional funding from the state's Concentration of Poverty Grant Program. And that funds a community school coordinator and a school health services practitioner to help support the infrastructure of a community school. Pillar 4 also established the Maryland Consortium on Coordinated Community Supports. So that has developed a statewide framework to expand a comprehensive behavioral health services to all Maryland students in a holistic, non-stigmatized manner. And lastly, it increases annual funding for school-based health centers, which provide services similar to those of a primary care practitioner directly within the school. So we all know this. We know that learning doesn't happen in a vacuum. So there are barriers within our education system and reality itself that just limit a child's success based on their skin tone, family's socioeconomic status, their disability status, or their ability to speak English. This pillar aims to provide supports for those students who are facing those structural barriers so they can give as much attention to learning as possible. Okay, we've made it to the last pillar. So that was a lot. The blueprint is a lot of movement. It is a lot of work. So Pillar 5 created the actors and boards that will essentially be working to make this plan a reality. And that's why Pillar 5 is named the Governance and Accountability Pillar. Firstly, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the recent administration change and what that means for literacy. Last month, the new interim superintendent, Dr. Carrie Wright, started at the Maryland State Department of Education. She has many achievements and titles, but she's distinctly known for her work as the Mississippi superintendent, and that it is there where she boosted incredible improvements in literacy in the state. So she is now here, and we are so excited for the work ahead. But let's get back into some other actors and boards. So the blueprint created these things called expert review teams that are teams of expert educators who analyze blueprint implementation in struggling schools. So what they do is they collaborate with schools, determine root causes of issues, and develop strategies. Very recently, actually, about a week ago, the State Board of Education approved a decision to create 5 statewide literacy instructional support expert teams. That's a very long title. Statewide literacy instructional support expert teams that consist of 2 literacy experts each, with the use of existing blueprint funds. Currently, the expert review teams have an estimate of visiting 50 schools this year. I think they're embarking on their journey tomorrow. However, this is lower than the original plan of the amount of schools they were going to visit this year. So they plan to use the remaining funds from this project to fund literacy expert teams. These teams have a plan to visit 24 LEAs, all 24 LEAs, to understand implementation of things like science of reading within schools. They also want to conduct a gap analysis for literacy in the state and provide concrete feedback directly to the LEAs. Their work will inform the development of a statewide framework of literacy. So there's a lot to look forward to in that front. I also want to highlight the blueprint implementation coordinators who have been appointed by the school system and county board. They are the people responsible for the implementation of the blueprint in their given school system. So usually it's one person. It is a big role, but it is usually one person in each county. And now, lastly, and arguably most importantly, the blueprint created the Accountability and Implementation Board. So the Accountability and Implementation Board, otherwise known as the AIB, is an independent unit of state government that was created to ensure the successful implementation of the blueprint. It is currently made up by the 7 people you see in the circles on your screen. They are all high achieving leaders in education, government, and workforce development sectors from across the state. I want to emphasize that the AIB is the central accountability mechanism for the blueprint. It is absolutely critical to the successful implementation of the blueprint. The AIB is charged with things like ensuring that state and local government agencies spend their blueprint funds in alignment with stated goals. It makes sure that local school systems create strong implementation plans and implement those plans with fidelity.
Hi, Riya, we have a question in the chat. Oh, I think you muted yourself.
Oh, sorry, I muted myself. Oh, yes. So Ellen asked, great news about expert review teams. How do we find out more? Who serves on the teams and how they conduct their assessments? How do we contact them? I'm not sure about contact information, but a good place to look for information, and we can get you this, the link when we, at the end of this presentation, but the AIB and the MSDE websites probably have more information on expert review teams. I'm not sure about how to contact them as of yet, but there's more information on the MSDE website for sure. We'll get you that link specifically by the end of this presentation, Ellen, but great question. Okay, so moving on, keep the questions flowing. I know there's that was a lot of information, and there's more to learn. But I want to take a little break and move to more of an activity engagement piece. So I know I just mentioned implementation plans. So last March 15th of 2023, the first ever blueprint implementation plans were submitted by each school system. So what these plans do is they cover planning and implementation work that each school system has engaged in the 2021 to 2022 school year, and what they plan on doing for this school year specifically. These plans are helpful to inform us where the school systems are in terms of progress in implementing the blueprint. So the AIB and MSDE individually gave feedback to the school systems to improve their plans, and a few months ago, the AIB officially approved every single school system's plans. I wanted to make sure that you know where to find those plans because there is a specific section you will find especially helpful to understand your school system's literacy plans. I see another question in the chat.
Yes, before we move on with the activity.
Yeah. Similar to Ellen, are these full-time employees of the state? I'm not clear on who they are and how they are trained. Reagan, I am not fully sure. I'm pretty sure they're not full-time employees of the state, but we can find you clarifying information very soon. Someone on my team will probably put some links in the chat. They are known as most of them have been educators, and they are known as experts in education. So they have varying titles and different education levels, but we'll try to find a list of the names and the people on the expert review teams for you. Okay. So back to these implementation plans. I think it'll be very helpful for you to understand where to find these implementation plans so you can see what their literacy plan is. So we're gonna go to this link. Kalia has dropped it in the chat, but you'll be linked to this page on the AIB website. And this is where you can see every single county's implementation plan. So since UMD is in Prince George's, I'm just gonna click on Prince George's for fun. And there's gonna be a PDF saying final blueprint implementation plan. Clicking on that, it is a very long document. It is about 200 pages. So we're going to target one specific area, and that is around page 80-ish when it turns purple or green. No, sorry, it's going to take a little bit of scrolling. I'll give you the full um, full numbers. So on for the Prince George's plan, for example, it's on page 68. And you can see number 57 is the comprehensive literacy plan. So what the LEA was supposed to respond to is if they have a comprehensive literacy plan for English language arts that is aligned to science of reading. So what I want to do is take a few minutes for you to find your blueprint implementation plan for the county that you reside in, that you do work in, and read through this question 57 of their plan. And I want you to digest it, take it in, and see how you feel about it. Is it is it comprehensive? Is it a comprehensive answer that you would expect? Or would you expect more? More clarity, more detail? So I'm going to take about 5 minutes and using the chat that Kalia sent in the chat, navigate to your local implementation plan and go to the purple section of Pillar 3 and look at question 57. We're going to take 5 minutes, and after we're going to ask if you're satisfied, if you're not satisfied, and please come off mute if you're having trouble navigating your implementation plan. We're going to take 5 minutes. Five-ish. I think that was about 5-ish minutes. Um, what I'm going to do is I would love if you share your thoughts either in the chat, and since we have a few minutes, put in come off mute, raise your hand. I'd love to see some faces and share your thoughts. Are you satisfied? Are you not satisfied?
Sabrina Jones, did you come off mute? Did you want to say anything?
Hi, this is Britt Anaskevich. I'm with Montgomery County Children's Opportunity Alliance. We're a newly legislated early care and education coordinating entity. Yeah, I really wish there was more thinking and planning around how the lowest performing schools, especially Title I schools, will receive even more targeted supports that are both racially, culturally sensitive, supportive of the children and parents, and how parents are going to play an engaging role in their child's success. Our kindergarten readiness assessment rate is quite low. So that's what I wanted to share, and really appreciate what you're doing.
Yeah.
I can layer on. I'm Montgomery County. I looked at that one too. I was not surprised and happy to see the alignment to science of reading, particularly with the early reading, phonics, and foundational skills. I saw less attention to knowledge building as a key component of the science of reading, or it was more buried in there. And so I would have expected to see more of that more clearly, a stake in the ground there. And then I think similar, I feel like there's a little bit of a piece missing around the scaling of this and the change management needed to actually go from where they are today to where they're aspiring to.
Thank you, Reagan. Thank you, Britt. And anyone else? I see Darren, you see it's a good start, but you think that standards should be raised over time. And then Ellen, the Prince George's teacher support tuition reimbursement allocations. Sorry, could you also, the acronym sometimes just get me.
Oh, I'm
So
sorry.
Ellen, yeah.
IHE, yeah, Institute for Higher Ed. So the colleges, some of them listed just recently were evaluated as receiving pretty significant failing grades. I will exclude University of Maryland from that, but from the list, that's not acceptable.
Okay.
They receive failing grades on science of reading.
Okay. Yeah. So overall, some and a lot of concerns about different issues. Sharon, not satisfied. Okay. So thank you all for embarking on that journey with me. This is just one small part of your school system's blueprint implementation plan. It's like one very small part, but it's an important part. And as literacy experts in the field, feel free to reach out to your blueprint implementation coordinator. Feel free to elevate some of the issues you see, because one thing is they are required to submit another blueprint implementation plan next year. So I think the deadline has been pushed from March, but in 2024, they will be releasing another blueprint implementation plan before the first half of the year. And in that plan, there will be a requirement for a more comprehensive literacy plan. So during the development, it's really great to get in touch with that blueprint implementation coordinator and given your very valid opinions and expertise, because these blueprint implementations are coordinators are very spread thin. So any support and evidence that you can give them is very, very important. I also received a question in the chat if community school implementation plans can also be accessed. So a big part of the blueprint implementation plans that you just read are community schools. So if you go to the Pillar 4 section, there will be more discussion of community schools there and how they are implementing it, how they're using their funds. Yeah, Sharon, I'm not a literacy expert, but anyone feel free to please respond in the chat, answer Sharon's question. Discussion is always important. But thank you for that.
Sharon is right. That is an accurate assessment of interreading.
Okay. Thank you for your input. Yes. So let's move on. I hope you enjoyed that little piece of information. So now you know all about the blueprint. Your question is, what's next? So before we wrap up and move into more of a discussion and questions and comments, I just want to take a few seconds to take some action. At Strong Schools, we always like to take action with the knowledge we just gained, because that's where the power lies. So I am going to ask you to write a little note to your legislators based on the info you learned today. So using the link that Kalia, thank you for putting it into the chat. If you click on it, you'll be led to our website, which is, first of all, a great thing, a resource to have and bookmark. We have a lot of different infographics, information, requests for trainings available on this site. But if you scroll a bit down, you have this action item where you would put in your information, and there's a box where you can basically write to your legislator. It'll automatically tell you who your legislators are, also very important to know, and write a little bit about it, literacy, the blueprint, just introduce yourself. This is very informal, and usually legislators are very good at getting back to you. So it would be really great if you took 2 minutes. We'll meet back at 12:43 to basically just submit a little note to your legislator, say hi, and like how you really love what you love about the blueprint, how you think literacy should be elevated more. So we'll meet back at 12:43. Okay, so it is 12:43. That was a short amount of time. It's okay if you haven't submitted yet, but I would just love if every one of you submits something. And but we'll move on for the sake of time. I want to get to questions and conversation. But let's get back into it. Just finishing up my presentation now. I want to talk a little bit about the considerations and opportunities that present themselves to you as literacy experts, things how you can engage with the blueprint for Maryland's future, because I think that's really important. You just learned a lot. I know that it can be overwhelming, but I just wanted to lay out some things that you can do in your work. So the first thing I would encourage is involving Maryland students, their families, and community members in creation of Miles priorities and actions. So the research and practice you do is very, very powerful. And it's much more powerful if you base it in the needs and wants of the communities your work will impact. So that's always just a baseline. Community engage with communities and students and families, because your policies, your recommendations, your work is always going to go back to them. Next, we would love if you spread the word about the blueprint and its goals. Connect folks to Strong Schools Maryland's when they want more information, of course. So while you're out in those communities, share the knowledge about what the blueprint is, what it offers. The blueprint is Maryland's education code, and every resident in Maryland should know what to expect out of the government's commitment to our students. Of course, we are here to provide any support, so connect us to the folks who want to learn more about the blueprint, and we'll take it from there. Next, engage with state and local leaders about the importance of literacy and current research and best practices. You all are experts on literacy and the current best practices and ongoing research. Inform the folks that make decisions about literacy. Contact your legislators, your school boards, your blueprint implementation coordinators, and tell them what you expect. There's a lot of movement in the education space all the time. Literacy is a constant. Everyone cares about literacy, and you need to make the people, decision makers in Maryland, understand the current research around literacy. And lastly, always share your successes with Strong Schools Maryland for statewide elevation. Keep in touch. We want to help you brainstorm through challenges, but also celebrate your wins. We are all on the same team. We hope for an equitable future, a future where all students can reach their full potential. And literacy is one of the ways you do that. So when you have a win, when you have a challenge, we are here to support. And I want to end it with a thank you to Diana, to Professor Slaughter for having Strong Schools here for our Lunch and Learn webinar. We really appreciate your time in the middle of the day on the week before Thanksgiving. I know it's tough, but I want to open the floor for questions on the blueprint. Also, just comments. What pillar excites you the most? What do you think? What do you think needs the most work? So I would love for people to come off the chat and ask some questions.
Thank you, Riya. That was a great presentation. And yeah, I'll give people a few minutes to think and type their questions if there are any. Also, just feel free to unmute yourself.
Hi, this is Britt again. So sorry I'm not on camera. I'm multitasking, and that's it's never quite workable. But I just want to thank you again, and want to make a comment that in one of the AIB meetings, there was a community person. I can't remember which organization or association. It was an education accountability organization that was really concerned about the transparency of funding for the blueprint. And I echo that as well. Like I think it's really important that we see the funding going into this at the state level, also how our counties are approaching this, and whether or not there's an opportunity to leverage private philanthropic funding as well, because I just think it's extremely expensive to do this and extremely important that we get it right. And in the community in Montgomery County, we are not where we need to be at all for community-based pre-K. And so we're really concerned about the cost for childcare providers to elevate themselves to at least an Excel's level 3, and to pay the teachers what they need to be paid on parity, and to really ensure that it's culturally and racially relevant, supportive, that parent engagement is included as well. But financing is a huge issue.
Britt, want to thank you for your comment. It is also very valid, and the blueprint is expensive. It is an investment, and it will pay off if we do it right. But that requires accountability and transparency. Honestly, the person you may have heard speak may have been our executive director. But there is a lot of information. Local school systems have their own way of reporting finances, and then also the AIB state level. There is a lot of information. We need to work on making it concise, and we are a big advocate for that. So, and everyone, there's been a lot of movement on the finance side of like accountability. So keep up to date with us. We're going to be advocating for that. And I know a lot of delegates and senators are also a very big proponent. The word is, yeah, like they are rooting for that as well. And on that note, I see Delegate Solomon, your hand is raised.
If I can find my unmute, Raya, thank you. And Britt, thank you for the question. I just wanted to jump in real quick and say basically exactly what Raya had just said at the end there. I think many of us in Annapolis are really laser focused on making sure that we know where the money is going, and that MSDE is holding LEAs, as well as obviously the AIB is holding LEAs accountable for using their money appropriately. So I serve as the co-chair of the Joint Audits Committee, and actually just yesterday we authorized the Office of Legislative Audits essentially to further press MSDE. They had kind of said to us last year or the year before that they weren't interested in really holding LEAs accountable for the spending on some of the blueprint pieces, which was a little bit shocking. So OLA is going to we have an entire state audit team that is just meant to do this kind of work, even separate from education. But that is, so many of us are laser focused on it. The other piece I wanted to mention for those of you who are finance nerds and state budget nerds, we have a structural deficit. And so the Spending Affordability Committee presentation that we got just last week, and I can share that with Raya and with Diana so they can share it with the group. It very clearly shows that we do not have the blueprint now fully funded, or DJ has already beaten me to it. So, I think it's going to be really incumbent upon the entire community statewide to, give support and put a little bit of pressure on, not only the governor, but legislators to make sure that, we have a really comprehensive conversation about the needs of our state, the funding levels of those needs and how we actually accomplish that. The former governor kind of left us with a big hole. And so I don't think there's any better place. I think most of the folks on this call would agree there's no better place to invest our resources than in the blueprint. And we've just got to make sure that that happens. So I just wanted to share that with folks too, because I think the funding conversation is going to be so important going forward to make sure that we've got the out years of the blueprint covered. Thanks, Raya.
Thank you, Delegate Solomon. Just because I'm gonna see you again, Riya. You're gonna see me multiple times. Just want to correct you so you get it right.
Sorry, as a former teacher, that's terrible, Riya. Thank you.
It's okay. My executive director always tells me to correct, so I'm gonna correct. But thank you so much for your comment. I agree. We gotta push legislators, the governor's office, to really look at the blueprint and their commitment, and look at things like revenue generation. Like, this is the time for it. If it's going to come, that's what we need it. We can't wait a few more years because the blueprint is not fully funded, but we have the commitment to fully fund the blueprint. So it's time to look critically. And at the Spending Affordability Committee meeting, the budget expert there was the best way to the least disruptive way to fund all these projects like the Red Line blueprint was revenue generation. So time to push our legislators, the governor's office, revenue stream. So thank you, Delegate Solomon. Any more questions? I know we have about 7 more minutes left.